Now, people have been thinking about the stuff or the substances around them for a really long time. If we go back to 400 BC and Democritus, he used to sit around, there was a philosopher, he used to sit around and think, oh, well, I can see that there is some stuff. I'm made of stuff. I can see things around me. I wonder if I cut something in half and then in half again, and then half again, and half again, and half again, and half again, could I keep cutting it forever? Or I get to a point where the thing that I was cutting, I could go, well, I couldn't cut it anymore. It'd come down to its fundamental single particle. And he said, well, yes, I think that's obviously what would happen because you can't cut something forever. So this fundamental particle, atomos is what they used to say back then, but is the atom. So all matter is made from particles called atoms. As we've gone through our scientific history, I suppose, we eventually thought about it again in about 1808. And that was a guy called John Dalton, and he was a chemist, and he again said, well, you know what? Things must be made of very small particles, and I'm going to call them atoms. And he just thought they were just, they couldn't see them, they just knew that there must be the very small things that everything's made of. And then in 1897, Mr. Thomson came along and he discovered the electron. So he discovered that there were these also tiny particles which were negatively charged. And so he said, well, okay, so atoms must have negatively charged particles in them somehow. So he just figured there was this circle, an atom, and inside it were these electrons. And it's the plum pudding model. So there was a kind of big positive charge, but in it there were these other little electrons, and they were atoms. And then Lord Rutherford came along and he got some very, very, very thin metal and he shot some particles at it. And what you would expect if the material was all made of very solid atoms is that every particle would bounce off it. But what he actually found was that most of the tiny particles he shot at the very thin layer of metal went straight through. And so what he discovered was, in fact, that most of an atom's space, or that an atom takes up, most of the space an atom takes up, is empty. So he discovered that inside an atom, these very tiny particles, in the middle there is something called a nucleus, and then these electrons zip around the outside. He didn't quite know how they zipped around, but then really the important part was that all the rest of it, there was all this empty space that he was able to shoot his particles through. Obviously, some of his particles did bounce back. They hit the nucleus. Some of them deflected, so they kind of skimmed the nucleus, but lots of them went through this empty space to the other side. So he discovered that atoms have got a nucleus in the middle, electrons on the outside, and a great deal of empty space. And then scientists kept doing their work, and it wasn't very much later that Niels Bohr did some more experiments, and he in fact discovered that, yes, there was the nucleus in the middle of the atom, and this was kind of the center of it, but then the electrons actually traveled around the outside in these energy levels or shells. And so different shells of atoms could hold different numbers of electrons. The first shell is only able to hold 2 electrons, and then if an atom has 3 electrons, the third one will go to the next shell. The next shell can hold 8 electrons. The third shell can hold 18 electrons, and so on. There's a fourth and a fifth shell. And so he discovered that, yes, there was a nucleus in the middle. It's got protons and neutrons in it, and then electrons traveled around the outside in shells. But so this is also interesting. These Democritus to Dalton to Thomson to Rutherford to Bohr, we've just refined and refined. Scientists constantly push knowledge to a better state. So we look at what's come before and we say, well, can we think of anything better? If we look around, we do more experiments. Can we learn more things about the world? And that's what these scientists did to discover the nature of the atom. And scientists since then have pushed the discoveries even further.